So I always get this question, or in fact, this just happened recently. I was at a suit store, and as soon as I walk in, I present myself a certain type of way. Whenever you walk in the room, you kind of command people's respect or presence. Your presence commands their attention because I walk in very confidently, and but as soon as I open my mouth, they said, "But that's when we knew the difference. We could tell because there's something about you that's different." And people always wonder, why, what was it that you went through? How did you grow up, JR? What is this rareness about you? Why are you different than any other, and I hate this term, white boy, but why are you different than any other white man who grew up in the hood? I don't proclaim that I am any different. I believe that I'm just another man like anybody else, but I think God saw fit to bring people into my life to mold me into who I am. Very specifically, I know that's a broad statement, in the moments where my mother, who was a heroin addict, and I talk about that a bit in the book, in the moments where she wasn't present, there were women who stepped in, there were men who stepped in, that were black women and black men who affectionately raised me and were there. And so it's not like I grew up around a bunch of white people and understand what white culture is. So I don't know any difference. So the acceptance part of why I'm so comfortable being the only white man in a room full of black people, or in a setting, restaurant, club, wherever, is because I'm just comfortable. It's how I was raised. I'm always comfortable being the anomaly because that's how I was raised growing up in New Orleans. Now, as far as my love and appreciation and respect for the culture, this isn't something that, I learned at a later part of life. This was my whole life. This was my childhood. This was my nurtured childhood. And so I can only have appreciation for how I was raised because that's how I was raised. I've never pretended to be anybody. That's not me. At some point in the book, I talk about how during my mother's absence, I would be left in certain situations. And one time I was with, I thought he was a John. If people don't know what that means that's somebody my mama was having sex with in order to be paid so she can get heroin. But this gentleman, I think, became more of a friend to my mother because she felt comfortable leaving me around him. Now, this wasn't extended periods of time. This was a very short moment in my life, but I remember very distinctively, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember his name, I just remember his face. He was a dark-skinned man, and in my moments of uncertainty when my mother wasn't there and I'm looking for her because she would leave and not come back for days at a time, and when she did come back, she would say, Jeremy, walk with me. And because she probably just shot up heroin and she's trying to stay awake. But I remember one moment, remembering she wasn't there and speaking to him. And this man taught me how to pray. The first man to ever cover me was a black man. And I say that with love because I'm just 6, 7 years old at the time, and I'm crying because my mother isn't there, and I find a bag of needles, and he just very calmly comes to me and says, Jeremy, I'm not sure where your mother is, but I'm sure she'll be back, and I'm sure she loves you. But what I want you to do is put your hands together and pray with me. And he prayed with me, and that's something that's in my memory, forever entrenched in my memory. New Orleans, when I was growing up, circa 1989, 1990, 1991, murder capital of the world. At that time, I believe there was a letter that was written to Bill Clinton by a young boy who, wanted there to be peace and so much violence, and he ended up getting killed in a shootout. I think there was a lot of attention on New Orleans during that time because there was so many, murders happening in the very small neighborhoods that we had. It was interesting. It makes me smile because I remember those were fun times, but at the same time, you didn't realize the risk that people took in order to live a certain type of lifestyle. So how did the environment in New Orleans inspire me to get to where I am today? I will tell you, it gave me a certain level of resilience. I could survive off of the bare minimum, but I always wanted more. It made me want to go beyond what my environment was. It was almost like an intrinsic feeling. I think, God would remind me, Jeremy, you're here for a reason, but this isn't where I want you to be. Yeah, there was a point in my life that I wrote about in the book that was very difficult. Like when I started unpacking that, and when I took that out of being compartmentalized, it gave me chills to think about that one night in New Orleans when the people that I thought were really looking out for me, I think they really were trying to use me for financial gain. And it was a moment of almost an out-of-body experience where somebody is really asking me to kill somebody. And for a $5,000 money order that I'm not even sure I'm gonna get a significant portion of. It wasn't like it was life-changing money. It was actually very insignificant. And in that moment, I think it was, if I hadn't made the right decision, if God hadn't been there with me in that moment, I don't know that I would ever be to where I am today, because that was a significant, very significant crossroad in my life. And I'm grateful that I was covered and protected in that moment. To have a message for people who feel trapped in their circumstances. Absolutely. I've been there many times before. The first thing I want people to do is to give their fears and their failures in that moment an opportunity to have some grace. Don't be so difficult on yourself. Whether you failed at something or you made a mistake, you have to show yourself some grace, because the resilience of going through those moments is you can change the outcome of that failure or that lack of success or even that trauma. Now, trauma you can't always fix, because if you lose a loved one, you end a relationship, I just want you to have grace for yourself. Don't beat yourself up, because that'll hold you back from getting to a successful place. Then after that, say, this is the lowest platform for me that I will ever get to. Now it's time to pick myself up and keep going up. Once you're able to encourage yourself to move forward, now use that memory of where you never want to go back to. Never want to go back to feeling that way again. You never want to go back to remembering the helplessness of that moment. You never want to go back to feeling the sting of failing. Use it as motivation. Find a way to have that deeply imprinted in your brain. And then move forward and set reasonable expectations for yourself. If you lost a loved one, I pray on that you will give that to God, and pray that God gives you the discernment that they're at peace and that you're at peace. And then go out and make a difference for them. Make them happy. That's what I did when I lost my mother. I chose in that moment that I was going to make her proud, and I've lived every day. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I know she'd be yelling at me. But overall, I believe my life, I found a way to make her proud of me. That, my friends, is how you endure.